Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Tszyu had this to say on the heels of his big win over Dennis Hogan. He says, Charlo stopped Hogan in 7. I did it in 5. I can compete with the big boys. Tszyu is the WBO's #1 ranked challenger, which puts him in line for crack at the current world champion Brian Castaño. Tszyu is now looking to get in the ring with one of the top names in the weight class. I'm not satisfied, Tszyu said. I want to be a global boxing star. That's my goal. It's always been my goal, and I need those big guys. We're at a stage where I do believe I can compete with big boys. Charlo got rid of Hogan in 7 rounds. I did it in 5. So my pace was a bit more quicker than Charlo's. I want an international fight. I want to be recognized globally. Tszyu, the former son of world champion Castaño, has broken away from his famous father's shadow. I just slowly started picking it up, and it was a mixture of body and head that caused the damage. Because the headshot was what dropped him. He was feeling every shot, and it was only going downhill for him. I thought I was picking it up every minute, and it was just a matter of time. He was getting worse and worse, and I think his corner did a good job. When I'm in the ring, this is my kingdom. Round 1, I was a bit too excited. That comes with experience. In rounds 2 and 3, I was able to slow it down and not rush and be able to pick certain shots. I was rushing a bit, and I wasn't 100% happy with that performance. I managed to take in this morning's action going down in the land down under. And, once again, I was impressed with what I saw from Tszyu, how he was able to pressure Dennis Hogan from one side of the ring to the other, but do it in an educated way, behind his lead hand. Dennis couldn't do much more than try to smother Tszyu's work by diving into a clinch. Outside of that, Dennis didn't get a whole lot done in there. And round after round, the situation just became worse and worse for Dennis Hogan. I have to say that Tszyu exhibited a lot of poise and a lot of control in this fight. But does exhibiting control against Dennis Hogan mean that he's ready for the likes of Brian Castaño, mean that he's ready for the likes of Charlo, Tony Harrison, these kinds of fighters? And I have to say no, it's not a convincing enough argument yet, at least not for me. He's almost there. He has all the makings of what could be an elite fighter in the very near future, but beating Dennis Hogan don't mean that you're gonna
beat Brian?
You go in there and beat Jamel or one of those guys. It doesn't.
This was a good learning fight for Tim.
We can't lose sight of what Dennis Hogan was coming from ahead of this fight. This is Dennis Hogan's 3rd consecutive loss on paper. To some, it's only his 2nd, since a lot of people are convinced that he should have got the decision in the Jaime Munguia fight. Make of that what you will. You can't say that about that Charlo fight that took place at 160 pounds, though, can you?
Nope.
He got knocked out in that fight. He did. And while he was out of place in the middleweight division, you can't deny what toll that might take on a fighter over time, unless we forget that fight took place over a year before this fight did. Don't misunderstand me.
I'm not diminishing Tszyu's win over Dennis.
And I'm not levying criticism against Tim for having fought him. I'm just giving it to you straight. Beating Dennis Hogan under these circumstances when he's coming off a knockout loss in the middleweight division and over a year of inactivity, that does not communicate to me that he's ready for the Brian Castaños and Charlos of the world. It just doesn't. And while he might be the #1 contender by way of the WBO, that doesn't guarantee that he'll get a shot at that title in his very next fight. I didn't see anything from Paco and the people over there at the WBO stating that this was a final eliminator of some sort for an interim spot or a mandatory spot. I didn't see that in the buildup of this fight. Perhaps you guys did, though. Even if that did happen, or didn't, I don't actually imagine that Tszyu versus Castaño is going to be next. Tszyu is in a unique position that most fighters, under these same circumstances, don't find themselves in. Tszyu has been on pay-per-view in the land down under, at least by my count, but 3 times. 3 times. That's more times than Charlo's been on pay-per-view here in America. And he's a unified champion. Brian Castaño, he hadn't been on pay-per-view once. Tim Tszyu is in a unique position that most fighters
Without a belt.
at this stage in their careers don't find themselves in. He's already a draw.
He is.
He's already a big draw in the land down under. Did you see the crowd? Did you see the crowd for the Bowen Morgan fight? Did you see the crowd for the Jeff Horn fight?
Don't try to convince yourself that Australian money ain't no good.
The money in the land down under, that boxing scene, was good enough that Manny Pacquiao, one of the biggest names in the sport, thought enough of it to go down there, fight Jeff Horn. Never mind what happened in the fight. That's not the point. The point is that their money's just as good as our money.
It had to have been if Manny Pacquiao thought enough of it to go down there.
I think a lot of Americans, a lot of people in this part of the world, underestimate what dollar amounts can be generated in the foreign market. Foreign market, which isn't foreign at all to Tim Tszyu.
He's from there.
He's from Australia, hometown guy, and he's a big name there.
Sells a lot of tickets.
And you know that last year, Tim Tszyu, in that Jeff Horn fight, he played to a bigger crowd than anyone else did in the year of 2020. That's right. There was something like 16,000 people there.
This was during COVID times.
That being said, if Tim Tszyu is moving tickets in the way that he's moving tickets, if he's selling pay-per-views in the way that he's selling pay-per-views, the question then becomes, why would he be fast-tracked into a world title shot, a world title opportunity, when he doesn't necessarily need a world title in order to keep drumming up business? I've no doubts that Tim Tszyu wants to be a global star. He wants to push himself and test himself against the best junior middleweights in the world. Try and understand me. I think that's a genuine sentiment coming from Tim. I just don't imagine that's going to be the very next thing he does. There are certain issues that need to be addressed, and one of them is that Tim is a bigger draw in Australia than Brian Castaño or Jermell Charlo are in the United States. Oh, that's right. He's been on pay-per-view domestically more times than they have domestically.
You can't offer him peanuts to come here and fight you.
And the same is true in reverse. They can't offer either Brian Castaño or Jermell Charlo peanuts to go down there, fight them. Ask me if any of those fights happen in the near future, and I dare say no. But that's all right, because Tim Tszyu doesn't need those guys to keep making money. In the in-between time, I'll tell you something, he can conjure up anybody from Liam Beefy Smith, who's going to be in action very soon in Russia, I think it is. You know, he could conjure up a Liam Beefy Smith or even a Jesse Vargas, who's set to be making his ring return on the undercard of Canelo versus Saunders. He can conjure up those kinds of guys and still do very good business before he ever challenges for a world title. And because he's in a unique position to do so, I anticipate that that's the kind of stuff that's going to happen. That's the kind of stuff that's going to go on. Tim Tszyu versus Michael Zarafa in the land down under does very good business.
I'm not advocating against Tim Tszyu versus Jermell Charlo or Brian Castaño.
If he wants to pursue those fights, I'm all for it. I'm just telling you that I don't believe that's what's going to happen next. And even though I don't believe that's what's going to happen next, that's okay. He has other options, the kind of options that most guys don't have this early in their careers.
That's what I'm saying.
In men's lightweight news, I'm sure most of you have heard already, on May 25th, it's official. WBC lightweight champion Devin Haney is going to be taking on the former WBA and Ring Magazine lightweight champion Jorge Linares in a fight that, at least according to Devin Haney and Eddie Hearn, is supposed to prove why he's the best lightweight in the world. And look.
What?
I like the fight. I've said that before. I like the fight. No complaints about the fight. But beating Jorge Linares is not going to prove that Devin Haney is the best lightweight in the world.
Mostly because Jorge isn't the best lightweight in the world.
He's definitely one of the better ones. Top 10 in the division, I'd go as far as saying that. But beating Jorge, if Devin does beat Jorge, it doesn't quite make the statement that Devin and Eddie are claiming it would make. Nevertheless, it would be the best scalp on young Devin Haney's resume thus far, but there still is more work needs doing. I mean, even beyond this fight, I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I don't want to make it impossible for Devin to gain respect and earn his stripes, but there are still other guys out there, not exclusive to Ryan Garcia, not exclusive to Teofimo Lopez, and definitely not exclusive to Jorge Linares. You got your Richard Comeys out there, former IBF champion Richard Comey, who just took out Jackson Marinez in vicious fashion, I might add.
But if a Ryan Garcia fight don't happen after this,
say that Devin beats Jorge, what happens after that? Should we expect to see the Ryan Garcia fight then? I think the answer is no. Should we expect to see a Teofimo Lopez fight after that? I mean, I'd like for that to be the case. I'd like for those kinds of fights to happen sooner than later. But this is the sport of boxing, folks.
Yeah.
Not a fast food joint.
How many times have we had to play the waiting game?
That's saying that even if Devin beats Jorge, in whatever fashion, after that fight, can we expect to see him fight Ryan? Can we expect to see him fight Teofimo? I don't think so.
I'd like to be wrong about this, but I don't think I am.
So if it happens that way, the good news is there are still other people out there for Devin to fight. Interesting people, engaging contests, engaging matchups like Haney versus Comey.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Because the man that's set to stand in front of Devin Haney in the immediate future is not Richard Comey or anybody else, it's Jorge Linares. And what challenges Jorge brings to the table is that he's a pretty good damn boxer himself with one of the best right hands in the entire lightweight division. I think that this will be a test of Devin Haney's boxing acumen, as it is his boxing, not his speed, not necessarily his power, but his boxing that is viewed as Devin's bread and butter. He's not a power guy, or being billed as a power guy, I should say, like Gervonta Davis. He's not a speedster, not necessarily like Ryan Garcia.
And nobody's calling him the Matrix like they called Loma.
Devin's bread and butter is his boxing and being an all-around good boxer. Because Devin ain't the biggest puncher, Jorge Linares has an out to make this a difficult fight for Devin. I don't view Jorge as being all that durable these days, in spite of his ability to box, his boxing acumen, and his experiences, his quality straight right hand. I don't view him as being all that durable, but because Devin's not that big a puncher, kind of evens the scales. It does, just a bit.
Remember, Devin went 12 rounds with Gamboa.
That's not a knock on Devin, that's just an observation that, Yuriorkis Gamboa is yet another guy who's not viewed as being all that durable these days. And I lost count of how many times Gamboa has been knocked down throughout the course of his career. He's just not all that durable a guy. Now, Devin might have beat him, and he might have beat him in lopsided fashion, but he didn't stop him. And I highlight that because Devin's not a power guy, so there's not much chance of Devin, getting a first-round knockout in this fight. And that opens the door for Jorge Linares to try and make this competitive.
Make it a contest.
Make it a fight. I think at minimum, this will be a good learning experience for Devin Haney, who might open up as the favorite with the bookies.
But I do think he's going to have to work for it.
I do think Jorge Linares is going to put him in a position where he has to. And finally, per bad left hook, Miguel Cotto and Juan Manuel Marquez are set for a June 12th exhibition match. The floodgates have been opened, people, as this is not the only fight of its kind set to go down in the very near future. I'm hearing rumblings about Morales versus Barrera, 4th installment, also in the works. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is set to lock horns in a crossover fight with MMA star Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
We know that Mike Tyson's got something going on. He's got something in the works. Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. I mean, what the hell is happening here?
Steve Cunningham versus Frank Mir.
Oscar De La Hoya is in the process of his comeback.
So is Sergio Martinez.
Chavez Sr., El Gran Campeon. He's been having some novelty acts, some novelty fights of his own.
We got a TikTokers versus YouTubers card set to go down someplace.
Zab Judah's got some sort of celebrity boxing match thing going on, set to go down somewhere in Miami.
What the hell is happening?
I want to preface everything I'm about to say with this. I'm not actually against these novelty acts, exhibition cards, spectacles, whatever you want to call them. I'm not against them because as a consumer, for me, it's simple, really. If I'm interested, I'll watch it. If I'm not, I won't. I'm not interested in the vast majority of these novelty cards, of these novelty acts, of these exhibition matches and spectacles. I'm not interested in most of this stuff, so I won't be keeping up with it that much moving forward. But I'm not against these spectacles either, because they don't get in the way of what I want to see. But if we're seeing an influx of them, it's because of what I told you before. The sport of boxing, the actual sport of boxing, at least in this part of the world, where a good number of these exhibition matches and novelty acts are set to take place, the sport of boxing in this part of the world is not delivering as it should be. And because it's not, it creates a void that is now being filled with just these kinds of novelty acts, these circus fights, these freak fights and freak shows. That's what this is. That is how you can explain the influx of these kinds of cards between TikTokers and YouTubers and Lamar Odom versus this guy. Steve Cunningham's in a crossover fight with Frank Mir. Chavez Jr.'s in a crossover fight with Anderson Silva. I mean, that is how you can surmise and account for why all of this is happening in such high abundance. It's because the sport of boxing in this part of the world is not delivering. You could have never got away with staging this many novelty acts, this many novelty cards, if the big fights, all of the big fights, were happening. There wouldn't be any money in it. I mean, imagine trying to get people interested in Chavez versus Anderson Silva while Maypac was the conversation. Or imagine trying to get, people interested in Steve Cunningham versus Frank Mir when you got a fight like, I don't know, Hagler versus Hearns or Hagler versus Leonard. Do you see what I'm getting at? That you can't monopolize
The audience.
the fight fans' attention, or just anybody's attention really, with those kinds of freak fights when the sport of boxing is actually delivering. But more and more, this part of the world, in this boxing scene, the American boxing scene, here in the West, we see entire divisions of guys that aren't fighting each other. Now, if you're a level-headed fight fan like me, you can appreciate what fights are going on. I'm okay with Haney versus Linares. I'm okay with Garcia versus Fortuna. I'm okay with those fights. But the casual fan is not. And unless it's those fights that are happening to galvanize not just the hardcore boxing fans' attention, but the casual fans' attention as well, unless those are the kinds of fights that are happening, vast majority of fights in the sport of boxing go unnoticed and unappreciated. And these circus fights end up getting a lot of attention. If there weren't a void to fill, you wouldn't be seeing this influx.
Is it possible for all these old guys to still get this much attention?
Why are they so confident that they can turn over a profit staging these circus fights, these freak shows, and these exhibition matches? Well, it's because the sport of boxing, at least in this part of the world, ain't shelling out superstars anymore. There's a lot of guys out there, and I hate to say this, that don't want to do things the hard way. Got a lot of young guys in that lightweight division.
They ain't fighting each other.
You look at that welterweight division. The biggest fight that division has to offer, one of the best ones, at least the most intriguing, that fight ain't set to go down. That fight ain't being made.
The champions at middleweight are staying away from each other.
Neither Charlo or Demetrius Andrade are on Gennady Golovkin's radar, and he's currently the biggest name at that weight. You can't get Charlo to fight Demetrius Andrade no matter what he says. Yeah, it seems like he's starting to come around now, but you and I both know he's not going to fight Demetrius Andrade in his next fight.
He's not.
Andrade himself is set to fight Liam Williams in what I think is a solid fight, but a fight that won't get the casual boxing fans' attention, and this is what's going on. When the best fights are happening,
The best fighters emerge.
and stars are born, but that's when the best are fighting the best.